We've had a bunch of folks in the last couple of days talking about taking their current businesses, being aware of the digital transformation opportunities that exist, and how to tackle that. And there's a whole bunch of words that we've thrown around that. Really, the first question I'd love, given your experience, to hear is, where do you start? How have you, because I think there's lots of boil the ocean types of commentary, but generally boil the ocean projects don't work. So I'd love to get your sense of your experience of where you've seen people start and how can folks in the room take away, this is a way for me to break this into bite-sized pieces and deliver success to my organization.
No, it's a great point. So when we think about digital transformation efforts, sometimes people think about it in small, discrete projects, right? Like, I'm going to move things into the cloud. I'm going to mobilize my mainframe. I'm going to take content and digitize it. I'm going to get to analytics and insights. And that's a great way to start. But to get it to really work, you have to tie it back to a business model. Right? And that's the hardest part, right? So how am I monetizing things in a different way? So am I selling subscriptions? Am I selling ads? Am I selling a service, right? And part of that monetization goes from a product to a service to an experience and to an outcome, right? And you do have to think about it in that way. But before you even start, there's so many basics you've got to get right. Right? You've got to start monetization in the cloud. You've got to start monetizing your data. You've got to figure out how you orchestrate your processes, right? And that's where you start to make that kind of foundation.
And if you look across the last 2 to 3 years of corporate evolution, is there a case study? Is there something you can look at and say, here are some abstractable concepts that I saw be effective in getting out of the starting gates?
Oh, no, there's a great one. So who here has the Domino's app? Raise your hands. I'm not trying to judge, but no, who here has the Domino's app? Okay, so the reason I bring up the Domino's app is because on a Friday at about 4 p.m., what happens? Do you guys get the alert? Yep, everybody gets the alert. Now, this is the most interesting story in the world. Domino's actually is one of the best performing stocks since 2010. It outperformed a Netflix, Amazon, a whole bunch of places in terms of return. It was an $11 stock when they started, okay? In 2009, 2008, the stock was in this, well, we're on live TV. The stock was not doing really well. The stock was not doing really well. And there, if you go look at the stock price, someone tell me what the stock price is right now. Look it up, yell it out. And as you're looking at it, it's incredible, right? And it started by digitizing their operations, right? You can track a pizza from the time you order the pizza all the way to the point it's 1 minute before in front of your house, right? It is that good. And they've digitized their operations. They're even using AI. You take pictures of the pizza, they're trying to figure out what the ultimate Domino's pizza looks like, right? And they're crowdsourcing it from your pictures to do machine learning in the background. Right? And that's an example of a company that wasn't digital to begin with that actually succeeded in digital transformation. What was the stock price? Anyone? From $11. One of the best returns out there.
Should have bought Domino's stock.
Well, here's the thing. But even though you win digital transformation, it's not over.
Yeah.
Right? Here's the thing. Domino's is getting its butt kicked right now. Why? Because you order pizza once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks. You ever see, you use Grubhub, Uber Eats, food aggregation services meets ghost kitchens. They're getting like 4 or 5 orders a week.
Wow.
So now they're getting their butts kicked, right? Even after they succeeded in digital transformation. So there's no rest for the weary on this.
You also did something there that we think of as commonplace now, and that is, what's the stock price? Look at your phone. What's the amount of information that exists now? The technology behind that generally can come from a number of different places. It can come from legacy systems. It can come from data stored in a mainframe. It can come. How do you think about, and many of our customers here are big global organizations with lots of technology, and they're trying to leverage their existing data sources. How do you think about the role of those legacy as well as emerging technology platforms in digital transformation? My question is maybe specific to the mainframe, but it's multiple sources of data that have to exist seamlessly in this little screen that I carry around so I can order a pizza and track it and figure out what's going on. There's a little bit of magic in making that happen.
Who's got a mainframe? Raise your hands. Who's working with mainframes? All right, do not get rid of that thing. It is amazing, right? Every time you hit an airline site, a banking site, what are you doing? You're mobilizing the mainframe. You've basically done that. That is the fastest. I mean, honestly, I walked in, I got in here about 5:30 this morning from the Venetian. I looked in the back end of what they're running. They're running LMS. Right? They're not even running Opera. They're not running any other system. They're on the mainframe. And I asked the guy, why? He said, faster. It's faster than anything else. Now, the challenge we have right now is moving data silos out. There's a concept we have called infinite ambient orchestration, which is Headless, intention-driven microservices, next best action powered in an ambient way, so it's contextual, it's smart, it's machine learning based, and orchestration. And we think the future of a lot of applications isn't taking what you have and just putting it into the next set of technologies. We think it's really important to decompose microservices. So decompose your processes into microservices, take those microservices and make them in a way that you can string them together across different systems, right? And your ability to move content, the ability to move data, your ability to orchestrate, that is gonna be the key to how you succeed in digital transformation, because you need that speed factor, right? And it doesn't matter where the content lives, right? It's not gonna matter. It matters how you orchestrate the content on the fly at that moment in time, just like, hey, what was that stock price, back to your point.
And so where are you seeing these initiatives being driven inside of large organizations? I think many companies we talk to now have a chief data officer. They're segmenting out, we're talking about silos. IT in some ways is becoming more siloed as we're trying to have more specificity in terms of what people do. How have you seen companies organize successfully? And also, what are the pitfalls? What have you seen people do that's unsuccessful in terms of trying to organize around this this initiative of digital transformation?
Let's do a quick experiment. Who's on the IT side? Raise your hands. Who's on the business side? All right, turn around, shake hands. It's exactly the point, right? So the challenge right now is that, traditionally IT is doing infrastructure, keeping the lights on, making things happen. Business is going out, doing different things. Now, if IT wins, right, you typically have a lockdown environment and business doesn't succeed. If business wins, it's chaos for IT, right? And so the question is, how do you find that right balance? And I think that's been the challenge lots of people have had. And so you've got to bring the teams together, and that's why we've been talking a lot about Agile DevOps, Agile Tech DevOps, right? It's part of getting everyone together in the room to make things not just move faster, but also make sure that we get different perspectives in that approach. And so one of the things that people are doing a lot in digital transformation is a concept called design thinking. Have you guys ever heard about design thinking? Okay, so design thinking is an approach where you put yourself as into the stakeholder's shoes and you apply empathy and you try to understand why or how something gets done so that you can design from that point of empathy for that stakeholder. When you do that, it actually changes the way you view a solution, right? The idea is to make sure that you've come across it from different points of view, you've understand how people's patterns are, and you have a chance to actually streamline or improve that process. So I think those are a couple things that are helping to do that. And then back to your point, chief data officer, chief CIO, chief digital officer, they're all battling with each other, right? It's brutal. But I think people assign those roles to get started. Like we actually coined chief digital officer sometime in 2009. Right? And part of the reason we brought that up is we actually believe that in the future there will be no chief digital officers. Everybody's going to be digitally enabled, right? A CFO that actually understands brand new business models, a CHRO that actually is hiring for different skill sets, a CTO that actually understands what the business requirements are, a CIO that actually thinks about new types, how technology actually changes, revenue models. And so we actually think people are going to be digitally enabled over time.
So yesterday we heard about the concept of the algorithmic leader, and that's a complicated term, but what I think it really means is a person who has, you use the term empathy, the skills to kind of understand the problem and how technology can impact the problem while still having more of a personal touch to running the business. And that got me thinking about how do you find or develop or kind of encourage that thinking and those people to kind of rise up in the organization and say, aha, I understand technology, I understand how we could make this process better, here's what we can do, because it seems like it's very hard to nurture that in the IT environment that you just articulated.
Yeah, no, I think what's really important is to do the pairings between IT teams and business teams much more closely. Sometimes swap a business analyst from an IT analyst and swap people on teams, and you start getting that level of empathy. Because people say, oh, I didn't realize it was going to be this hard if you put these types of requirements in place. And the IT teams are like, oh, I didn't understand the business really needs to get this part done. And that's part of the bridging of that conversation. But there's also another piece that's important. Like we look at generations of workers, not in the traditional sense. We see 5 generations based on how well you know technology and how likely you're going to know technology. And I think that's a very important part to think about those 5 generations of digital. And it's not by age. So a quick thing, poll here. Who in the room actually takes notes on pencil and paper or pen, okay, you guys do, all right? Now, it's kind of interesting. We got notes here, right?
Wait, I'm afraid of where this is going, but continue, please.
But I'll start with this, right? And if you take those out, I mean, one would assume that, you should, I mean, look, we have laptops, we have tablets, we have mobile devices. Like, why are you actually doing this on paper? You're what I would call traditionally a digital immigrant, okay? Right? Because you're in between all these different areas. Like, you should know better, right? Digital natives, okay? Digital natives actually start that way. And I volunteer in retirement homes. Those folks are in their 70s and 80s. They're not doing paper and pencil because they can barely hold on to it. But the point being is that, sorry, I'm getting my butts kicked. This is online, David. But the point being is they're texting you, right? They're texting you from their tablets. They're texting you at work. They're texting you for IT support, right? So, and they're taking pictures, and they're more digitally engaged and as a digital native than some folks, right? You just prove that. Okay, now who takes pictures of the notes that they put together and sends it to themselves? See, now you're doubly a digital immigrant, right? So digital immigrants are in between, right? Now you have folks that are like what we call, some folks are digital holdouts. They're just not going to do it, right? That's not kind of what they do. And there are other folks that are just on the fence, right? But my point being is, like, don't judge people by age, but think about how likely and how proficient they are in terms of how well they know technology and how likely they'll do it. Age isn't the factor here.
I'm resisting the urge to writing any of that down because I somehow feel there's
a voice assistant on an iPad somewhere that's transcripting this. We'll be okay.
And I'm definitely not going to take a picture of this and send it to myself. But so what you touched on there, if we abstract it back to organizationally, there's a culture issue that a lot of companies have to overcome, and arguably, the longer you've been in business, maybe the more successful you've been at doing what you're doing, the harder it's going to be to culturally make that shift, to think about your business in new ways. And I'm thinking about that more in terms of, a lot of the industries that we work with here. There's a lot of companies here in financial services and healthcare, but how have you seen people make that cultural shift, and are there industries where it's going to happen faster, you need to be more aware, versus industries that can be a fast follower? And I will tell you, pizza was not on the top of my list, but I've actually read a bunch about Domino's, and really, what they did there is our product is not pizza, right? Our product is delivering food and the way they broke it down and disaggregated it, it costs them pennies to make a pizza. It costs them quite a bit to do all this technology, so their cost structure is now technology, not ingredients to make a pizza. It's rethinking their business fundamentally. How do we culturally do that, and where are the industries that are most apt to be changing?
Yeah, so what's interesting about Domino's, they're the fifth most popular website in the country, right? That's something to think about, right? Just at that level, on an e-commerce level. But to get started, I mean, you have to think about how a company's organized, right? 90% of a company is designed to be faster, better, cheaper. You have people that are really good at performing, right? And their job is to make sure that the trains run on time. Their job is to make sure that you squeeze out every single piece of efficiency out of the company. Their job is to make sure that things are automated, nothing ever goes down, right? And that's hard, right? When you're trained to do that, you're not thinking about innovation. You're not thinking about transformation. Now, there are a few folks that graduate from that, right? And they are their black belts. These are the folks that are experts, and they're the ones thinking about how I can make things 20 to 30% better, right? And that's about 5% of the company, right? But then there's this little group that's supposed to go out and blow out and do things that are 2x, 3x, 10x, right? And the problem is none of these three teams get along. And so you end up with a very big challenge. And so in order to make any of these initiatives work, you've got to make sure that the sustaining ops team, the innovation team, and the transformation teams come together, right? And that means they have to have the same metrics. Now, we saw this at some companies, like, oh, actually, I gotta be careful. I don't know who your clients are. We saw at some companies where they have one team that's based in Silicon Valley, right? That's supposed to think up all the innovations, and then the core team is somewhere else, right? And nothing ever happens, right? Because they're like, oh, these guys are wacko over here in California.
People refer to the California people as those people.
Those people. Those wackos over there in the Regis office sitting in San Francisco, right?
Probably a WeWork.
Or WeWork now, or depends on what happens to WeWork. But the point being is, like, they're like, this doesn't make any sense. We would never do that. I can't run the business that way. And so keeping separate teams, you need to do that so people can be innovative, but you have to bring them back. They've got to come back to the same business metrics. And if they don't do that, that's where they fail.
So what we saw yesterday in one of the presentations was a screenshot of an innovation lab at Fidelity. Fidelity apparently spends $3 billion a year on IT, and they had the same kind of problem. They set up internally. It looked really cool. I think there's probably an espresso machine in the corner, some tables, a couple of millennials with some facial hair hanging out, thinking new things. But not every company has the scale to create an innovation lab and have us, and so there's also an element of scale here. How can we start with small steps? Is it pick a project, pick a team? Because we have struggled internally at how to help those ideas kind of emerge and grow, and I'm sure that everybody in the room is having that same type of issue, because what you've just said is great, but I've got to maintain quality of service with my mainframe and deliver SaaS-based applications, and oh, by the way, I work in IT. Nobody ever calls me at the end of the day and says, thank you so much, my PC worked today. It just never happens. So how do you balance all that, and how do you raise that up the priority level?
So one of the things that we've seen larger companies do is really break up the CIO role into sub-roles and personas, right? There's a chief infrastructure officer. That person's job is to make sure that things are running efficiently. They've got 80% of the budget. Their job is to continue to figure out cost structures, cost streamlining, keeping things efficient inside the organization. Then there's a chief integration officer, and their job is to connect all the external systems back into the internal systems and make sure things are orchestrated in the right way. And then they also break out to a chief intelligence officer, and that individual's job is to get the right information to the right person at the right time in the right place in the right security model. And then there's a chief innovation officer's job is to figure out where can we take new technologies and bring them in. And traditionally what's happened is like a CEO may have those 4 roles, they're just not called out that way. And sometimes they share the roles with the business side, where the chief intelligence officer persona and the chief innovation officer personas are sometimes on the business side, and they bring them together. And that's one way to actually help do that, to actually facilitate, making sure everybody has a specific goal and objective around innovation.
So now I'm going to throw you a softball designed to help us at ASG create a better perspective than our customers, and I just said that out loud, so no one's surprised. So we provide a lot of technologies around information management. We've just delivered yesterday some tools and capabilities with workflow and process to deliver basically this framework for building content-centric business applications. How do you think about, here's the plug, how do you think about our technology, because I know you've spent some time thinking about how this can impact it. What have you seen from us, and what should we be doing to be more center of mind as companies start to tackle these initiatives? Because our view is we're something of an undiscovered company, even though we're $250 million in lots of places. What can we do better, one, to explain our value proposition, and two, to become more relevant in this discussion?
Oh, that's a great point. It's all about getting better user experience, usability, getting to low-code, no-code types of platforms so people can actually get up and running more quickly. It's about making orchestration and integration a lot easier. It's about making data intelligence seamless to the point where you want the business users actually running those types of products. It's also thinking about how to actually streamline IT systems management. It's a mess. Right? And anything you can do to actually make that easier and get onto a single plane faster, it's so much easier.
Yep. So you talked a little bit about who's done it well. I'd love your perspective on, no names needed, what have you seen? Are there a couple of examples of how not to do this? Companies that have begun an initiative and it's not been successful for reasons that, if you look back, should have been obvious at the beginning. What should we not do?
So don't believe in groundswells, things that are coming bottom up in digital transformation. It doesn't happen that way. These are top-down, board-level initiatives. You've got to convince both your executive team and the board that something is happening, you're about to get disrupted. I'll give you a great example of a massive disruption that could happen if you're in the electronics business, right? I could actually take out Samsung and LG very easily, and I'll explain why. And if you go out and do this, please give me a few shares. It's going to be a very interesting idea. So let me make you an offer, right? I'm going to guarantee you 72 inches of a flat screen. I'm going to give you 72 inches of a monitor for the next 5 years, and all you have to pay me is $15 a month. Anybody take that offer up? $15 a month, you get a 72-inch screen. Anyone in for this? And you can upgrade once during those 5 years. Would you take that deal? It's $900, well, something like that. Would you take the deal? Not a bad deal, right? Now, if I made that offer and people took that deal, what would happen? You would lock out the market. You would lock out the market for 5 years, right? And if I took break-fix data, all information about that, I could basically give you a brand new screen every 2 years based on warranty data, and I don't have to be a manufacturer anymore. I don't have to manufacture the screens because anything that breaks or fixed, because I'm going to give you a brand new screen, and if anything breaks and needs a repair, I'll take care of it, right? And because I have that warranty data, I actually have some very, very interesting insights because I can self-insure that, and I can arbitrage any of the breaks, fixes, and repairs to somebody else and actually win on that. You can lock out a market very quickly. Now, if you're a manufacturer company, you're not going to be thinking about that. That's the last thing on your mind. You're trying to get the latest technology in. You're trying to make sure that the screens are there. You're trying to make sure you got distribution on the back end. You're busy. But out of nowhere, someone can come out there and take you out by just buying that information break fixing and changing the business model to guarantee you screens as a service.
So what you've just said is frightening to so many companies, and if we abstract that concept away, it's the idea of getting XYZ, getting Ubered in your market or getting Amazoned in your market, fundamentally changing the way a service or a product is delivered. Most of us here have traditional businesses that we have clung to because they are good and well run. And how should we think about protecting that base, but also allowing ourselves to kind of toe dip into the new? And the analogy that was used yesterday that always comes to mind is the proverbial frog in warm water. What are the strategies you seem to be successful to allow companies to recognize earlier or early enough these types of threats and respond to them?
Well, so that's part of it, right? So what I wanted you guys to think about was how easily you could be disrupted. And it's very important to put together teams, interdisciplinary teams, to say, look, if the business model changed, or if we were to start a brand new company, how would we go out and beat up ourselves? Right? And you've got to go through that exercise, a war room exercise that says, hey, someone's about to Uber me, or someone's about to, transform a business. And if we were to build it from scratch, how would we do that? Right? And if you start doing that process and going through that, you'll identify where your vulnerabilities are.
Interesting.
Right? And one of the vulnerabilities that keeps popping up for everybody is that they don't invest enough in technology. Right? It's a crazy thing. So take Amazon, for example. I mean, retailers are like, oh, we're going to go beat Amazon. And I'm like, with what? Right? They're like, oh, we got 1% of our IT, 1% of revenue is focused on IT. And I'm like, good luck. You're never going to catch up. Like Amazon got 10% of their budget focused on IT. 10% of revenues is focused on IT. You're not even catching up. It's going to take you like 20 years to get to where Amazon was last year. Good luck, right? So there's an investment requirement that's in place. So if you can get rid of legacy debt, if you can get legacy technical debt out of your books, then you have a shot, right? So anything you can streamline, anything you can automate, anything to actually drive down those processes, that frees up money for innovation. And that, honestly, is the first part you start with.
We, internally, we have a view that every business effectively has core information. Every business's key value is around information and data and how to use that. We had an example yesterday of an insurance company that had taken actuarial data that existed in the system they'd had for a long time and winnowed down to just a few factors, really the pricing mechanisms that should drive pricing of term life insurance, and created basically a small app where you could answer some questions and get a term life insurance policy on your phone. A couple of frightening things, right? One, your phone is now your insurance agent. Two, the data is pretty good so that the company's built in a profitable business model, and they don't have an office on the corner in Topeka, Kansas, with 3 agents sitting there, sponsoring the local Little League team, which has a whole bunch of social implications if you think about that. Just the reduction of kind of our retail workplace. If every business is an information business in some way, how have you seen companies profit from or think new while still protecting that core business?
I think they're starting out in different divisions or creating different spin-outs to do that. It's very hard to do it when you have to hit earnings per share numbers and targets. I mean, it's very hard to do unless you create a separate entity. But we're also seeing a lot of technology partnerships where companies are willing to co-invest with you to co-create a brand new type of product. I mean, that's happening a lot with the cloud companies. Google, Amazon, Microsoft are willing to go into industries and co-innovate with you and build things that haven't been done in the past. So great example, like Philips basically partnered with Amazon to put all their healthcare data into the AWS cloud. Microsoft is working with retailers right now at the moment to figure out how to build an anti-Amazon, right? And so you see this all over the place. Google's doing the same thing. I mean, everybody wants to gang up on Amazon, so they're building another health cloud and a retail cloud to do things like that. So we're seeing those kind of partnerships start to emerge so people actually can invest enough to do that as well.
You talked a little bit earlier about business models and emerging business models, whether that be in product markets, subscribing to a 72-inch screen, or different pricing models across technology and software. I want to turn to the technology and software pricing models. You spend a lot of time with senior executives in IT. How are they thinking about, how are they attacking the problem of reducing spend on legacy to reallocate dollars to innovation? I think you just said that you need to reduce your legacy spend to free up dollars. What are the trends you're seeing there, and who are going to be the winners and losers of that, yet again, turn of the efficiency crank in IT spending?
Yeah, so I think the first part is really automation. You're seeing automation anywhere. You guys were talking about bots in the back there, right? I mean, it's
we introduced some RPA functionality yesterday.
Yeah, RPA, bots, I mean, process mining, you're gonna see those types of things pick up. Anywhere where you can actually do automated integration, orchestration, those are things that are important. Anything around security and compliance, we think that's gonna be, AI and ML are gonna play a big role helping people in that area. I think those are places where people are starting that investment, especially around anything around regulatory. I'll give you a great example. Is Samsung a client of yours?
I don't think so.
You don't think so? Okay, good. So remember the Galaxy Note 7? It's every airport in the world, right? So think about this. Like if you had 100 phones, which is 8 sigma in quality, take out $8 billion over 8 weeks in a recall, isn't that scary?
Yeah.
So if using things like AI and ML, you could actually go from 8 weeks to 1 week on a recall. That would be $1 billion. If you go from 1 week to a day, that would be a $100 million recall, right? What's 10 million in software for $100 million saved on a recall?
Right,
Nothing.
That's pretty good ROI.
And that's the kind of pitch you have to pitch to your CFO, right? You have to scare the crap out of them. You have to scare them on regulatory and what the risks are so that they make the right investments so you can actually build the right infrastructure investments to get there. Right? Building an ML program, an AI program, you can't do that overnight. But if you scare the CFO on compliance and risk mitigation, they're in.
That's the way to free up some budget.
You'll free up budget and get more budget.
So I want to turn it over to see if there are any questions in the audience. But as the audience is thinking up their terrifically pointed and insightful questions, I want to give you kind of a minute or two to say, look, here's what I'd like you, the audience, to take away from what I'm seeing in terms of both IT organizations making change and then how customers are demanding more access to data. Are there any universal principles that we should have as part of this journey?
Yeah, I'll leave you a couple. The first part is in digital transformation, it's about a business model shift. It's not just the technologies. You have to align the business model. Form follows function. You have to align the business model with the technologies you want to use. None of these are technology projects on their own. They're combinations of technology projects. So they're ands, right? AI and 5G or IoT and big data, right? These are things that come together. And so it's not about individual projects. The third thing is like data is the heart of every single digital transformation. It's the foundation. You can't do it without data. I tell software company execs this all the time. Like in 10 years' time, if you're like a cloud company and you're still selling software, you failed. It's about next best action, insights, and recommendations. You're brokering those demand signals in insight marketplaces, right? And so those models are changing and shifting as well, but that data is so valuable. And then I think the last thing to think about is that you can't do this on your own. These are projects that require partners, require co-innovation, co-creation. Sometimes you get in and you work with your technology vendors to actually create something new that doesn't exist. Because the stuff that already exists is going to be automated, but the question is, your business has to differentiate, so you're going to have to figure out ways to actually co-innovate and co-create to be successful.
Terrific. So I want to turn it over to the audience. Are there any questions that people would have for Ray? I know it's a unique opportunity to have someone with your perspective here. I see in the front row. The question is, if digital transformation is a journey as opposed to a point A to point B trip, how are companies organizing around a journey for the long haul as opposed to a discrete project?
Yeah, these are ongoing programs, right? And I think once you realize that top down, they get funded accordingly at the board level. It's not, oh, we're going to do digital transformation, and then we're going to do something else 24 months from now. Like, you can't do that, right? A lot of people have tried that, and it doesn't work, right? But you have to realize that along the way, you have to have business models built against it. Then folks become much more receptive in terms of the funding mechanisms that do that. But, you know, I mean, take a company like Target. They were on the Wall Street Journal, I think, yesterday about how they beat back Walmart, right? That was not an easy process for them, right? They thought they could just, you know, fix something in e-commerce and be okay, and they realized, no, this is distribution, this is logistics, this is how our people actually work, this is automation in a warehouse. It's about building new distribution centers. It's about the data, right? And you take something like Amazon, which is actually very interesting. I mean, do you know that they are the third largest digital ad company in North America? $8 billion in ads. Right now, Facebook and Google are like, you know, in tens of millions, right? For tens of billions, sorry, in ads. You know, and Amazon's coming up from nowhere to an $8 billion market in terms of ad revenue. So you can see these things pop up. You have no idea what's going to happen next. And once people see those examples, they realize, okay, this is going to be an ongoing program.
So if I were to summarize, my takeaways are, it's a journey, not a discrete process. Data is critical.
Yep.
Find a way to foster innovation within your organization because there are cultural requirements. Mobilize your mainframe. By the way, I'm going to use that later and not give you credit for it.
Okay.
Mobilize your mainframe. And maybe it's going back to the paranoid survive, right? That's an old term, but you've made me paranoid about so many different things here that we need to worry about. Anything else you'd add to that?
Let's end on a lighter note. No, but I think you know, this is the most amazing time to be alive, right? Because I mean, if you can dream it, you can actually build it now in technology, and it's never been anything like this before. One of my colleagues, Holger Mueller, says like this is like an era of infinite computing is ahead of us, right? I mean, you have infinite bandwidth, infinite compute, infinite storage. I mean, these things didn't exist before, right? And so the possibilities are out there, but we're all still trying to figure out how to put things together or fix broken things, and we're missing out on that. And I think if we can actually figure out how to actually devote some time on that innovation, there's a lot of opportunities out there for every company.
Yeah, well, this is exciting. You know, I live every day in a worrying about what's going to happen in a week or a month. It's really useful to step back and force us to really think about direction and strategy and trends. And so hearing from you and hearing your expertise is super helpful. So I really appreciate it. It's been really useful for me. For the audience, we appreciate your time, and thank you very much.
Oh, hey, thanks a lot, John.
Really appreciate it.
Sure.